back everyone to Close to Broke. Sorry about it being so dark out, but I guess my variable ND filter is doing its job. Welcome back to another episode of Close to Broke. My name is Kieran, and today we're going to be playing at the Gardens Casino. As you guys can see from this short clip here, the traffic is outstanding. 2x the amount of miles it is to get there. Earlier it was up to an hour and a half. Now we should be counting our lucky ducks as we have 45 or 50 minutes to get there. Anyways, should be a pretty short session, 2 to 3 hours. And then I think I'm going to be heading back here this way to enjoy some dinner with friends. So I'll take you guys on the ride with me, as you guys already know. Hope you guys have a lovely day. I've been excited to continue to bring more action for you guys, and moreover, full day. And let's hop into today's session. Buckle up everyone, because this one is a fun one. There's a ton of hands to go over. Without further ado, let's get into the very first hand of the session. Middle position makes it $60 to go. The hijack calls, and Saya, one of the longtime legends here of high stakes poker in the Southern California area, she decides to 3-bet to $275. She has like 80k in her stack. That's pretty cool. The action's now on me, and I'm on the button looking for a nice little squeeze spot, and I look down at ace queen of clubs. Well, that's a beautiful hand to have, I think, in this specific instance. I feel like calling is all right since I'm in position, but 4-betting taking over the reins of the hand just makes much more sense to me. I decided 4-bet here to $700. The action folds back to her. She asks for a count of my stack, and after a little bit of thinking, she ends up deciding on a fold. We're going to take that every day of the week. Nearly $400 in the middle already. I'll take that every single day. Alrighty, moving right into the next hand. We're battling once again with Saya, and once again, it's an interesting spot. Early position limps, early position 2 limps, and Saya isolates to $100. I find myself next to Act, and we look down at pocket queens. It's kind of ridiculous. We just keep having a big hand against her. I decided 3-bet here as there's no other good way of playing this hand. I make it $350 to go. Folds back to her, and she ends up making the call this time around. The flop comes 9-8-8 rainbow. With the action checked over to me, this is actually a pretty decent board to have a check back on. I talk about this all the time about being balanced. I'll check my ace kings here sometimes. And in this case, it feels like a pretty reasonable spot to check back queens. A little more dicey. I prefer to do this with kings or aces, but all right, let's see what happens. The turn card comes a pretty bad one as it comes the ace of diamonds. This now introduces a backdoor flush draw. And even worse is it now puts an over to my queens. With the action check to me, at this point, I think I'm pretty much in check down mode. No reason in betting here. Hard to get value from worse. So the action ends up going to the river that comes a jack of hearts. Once again, another really bad card. Jacks now beat me. And the only real hand that I think that I can get called by that's worse is tens. And even then, I think tens just snap folds either way. So with the action check to me, once again, I think that I pretty much mucked this hand up. I think c-betting the flop might have been a better choice than checking, but again, I'm just trying to be reasonably balanced. Either way, I end up checking it back and showing my hand down, and my opponent shows pocket jacks for a rivered set. So the old 6% comes in. Unfortunate. It's just how these sessions have been going for me lately. But you just got to live and learn with it. The one thing I can easily say is results oriented is that she's never folding the flop. And I'm checking the turn anyways. And the river, I'm going to lose more. So either way, we ended up losing the minimum somehow. And we're going to go ahead and move along from this hand. Well, it wouldn't be a Close to Broke vlog without a good old-fashioned punt. So let's hop into this next hand. I'm under the gun, and I look down at pocket deuces, and I shunned somebody a couple of episodes ago about opening pocket deuces under the gun, and here I am doing the same donkey move. I make it $60 to go, and for middle position, somebody decides to 3-bet to $185. Folds back to me. Well, we already up at this much at this point. Why not continue doing it? I end up making the call, and we're going to a flop that comes 8-3-3 rainbow. At this point, I end up playing inflow by checking it over to the opponent, who decides to c-bet for $175. I end up making the call, and we're going off to a turn card that comes at 10 of spades. I check over the action once again. At this point, our opponent is not slowing down. He bets $225, which is really small in comparison to the pot. With the action back on me, I feel like maybe there's a small chance my opponent can get away from his like jacks or queens, or maybe he has some sort of ace-king holding. Either way, I end up raising to $700 and leave myself about $2,000 behind. My opponent goes deep into the tank before eventually deciding on a 3-bet. He makes it $1,700 back to me. We're just 3-betting, clicking and clacking here. Don't know what the heck's going on at this point, but after the old clickety back type vibes, I can't do anything besides just fold here. Pretty poorly played hand in every single way on every street. But hopefully that's our only mishap of the day. If that is the case, I'll be okay with it. So as you guys can see, the session hasn't gone really in our favor, but hopefully we don't punt it all away. Anyways, in this very next hand, there's an interesting situation that occurs when early position limps and another early position player limps. The action folds all the way to me on the button and we look down at ace-8 offsuit. Oddly enough, this is a hand that, in my opinion, I don't know what everything else says or what you guys think, but I don't want to play a crappy ace like this multi-way, even if it's in position. I'd rather isolate a hand like this and try to get a heads up even, than go 4 or 5 ways. So with the action on me, I end up deciding to isolate here. I make it $125 to go. Unfortunately, my plan backfires, not because somebody raises me, but because I go 5 ways. Yep. The small blind, the big blind, and both limpers called. That means we're going 5 ways off to a flop. We're going to have to hit some magic or go crazy. And the flop comes jack-8 for rainbow. Nice. So there's a pretty obvious straight draw out there. And if it checks over to me, I think that we can actually bet and get called by worse in some aspects. Obviously, the jack exists as well, so that's something to be very cautious with. Anyways, with the action checked over to me, there's so much money in the middle. I think going 1/3 is pretty reasonable. I make it $250 to go. Luckily, this time we were able to get the blinds out of the way, but the limpers call, and we're going 3 ways off to a turn card that comes at deuce of clubs. All right, that brings a backdoor flush draw, which is pretty important. And after it checks over to me, I have a decision here. Am I going to be bluffing all my money again, or should I just check and take the showdown value of my hand? I think the latter is definitely the better play. We've already misplayed the hand to this point. So why add to that now? Because I think I can get my opponents to fold a better hand and sometimes get called by a worse hand. What do I mean by that? There's a bunch of draws that exist. Now the flush draws that exist out there. Maybe there's a combo draw. But also I think that if I jam here, I have about 1,300 remaining. That looks really, really strong multi-way. And I think I can get my opponents to fold a jack. I definitely think that the initial limper has something like Jack 10 or Queen Jack. And if that's the case, I think I can get him to fold. I think he's been fairly snug post-flop, and I don't expect this, character to get out of line with just a single pair holding. Either way, I end up putting my money where my mouth is. As you guys know better than anyone else, if there's a chance for me to go crazy, I'm going to find a way to go for it. I end up jamming all in for $1,300. With the action now back to the first limper, he goes deep into the tank. I lock my eyes and focus on just one card, and that is the 8 of clubs. I'm staring at it, not looking to sway my high sight. Eventually, our opponent does decide to make the fold. Okay, 1 down, 1 more to go. The next opponent thinks about it for a moment. The pressure is now on him before he eventually decides to fold his draw. Luckily for us, we were able to get this ridiculous hand through, and that'll definitely put us in the right direction. Really hoping to capitalize moving forward. Either way, really happy with the outcome. Not really happy with the play, but we'll live with it. I don't think that makes it $60 to go. And I find myself here in middle position with pocket Kirons, pocket kings. We end up 3-betting to $200. Our opponent ends up making the call. We're going off to a very, very dynamic flop that comes Jack 10-3 with 2 clubs. So a ton of draws out there, flush draws, straight draws, you name it, it's probably out there. With the action checked over to me, I decided to c-bet here for $175. Going with a little bit of a down bet, hopefully to allow my opponent to play back at me in some aspects, and that is what ends up being the case. Our opponent ends up raising to $500. This is a really weird situation where I actually don't want to just call here, and maybe it might be overplaying my hand in some ways, but I think that with the amount of equity that my opponent can have with just about anything here, I'd like for us to just get the money in and, yeah, see all 5 cards. That'd be the best case scenario for me. I feel like it'd be really, really poor if my opponent has like ace jack or something like that, and then it ends up coming to club and it just ends up killing the value for both of us or whatever the case may be. So I end up deciding to just jam all in for the remaining 2K behind. So 2,500 total is the bet. He already has 500 of that out there. Our opponent thinks about it for a little while before eventually deciding on a fold. So, I mean, I guess that's okay. Like I said, getting him to fold any of the straight draws or the flush draws is all right. It has a ton of equity against me. But either way, we're going to go ahead and take that. every day of the week. Making money is better than losing it, right? Moving right along here, I'm under the gun and I look down at pocket aces. Well, if the kings wasn't, perfect, well, aces, the old American Airlines, sure it is. Well, American Airlines sucks, but either way, I regress. I'm under the gun. I make it $60 to go. Only the button makes the call, who's playing somewhere in the neighborhood of like $350 behind. We're going off to a flop that comes king 6-6, 2 diamonds, and a heart. Nice. Pretty good flop for us, especially when we do, in fact, have the ace of diamonds. I end up checking the action over to my opponent, and he decides to take over the betting lead by making it $75 to go. With the action back on me, and considering he only has like $300 behind, I decided to just go all in here, letting him get all the money in the middle. If he has a king, I doubt he folds. If he has a flush draw, I doubt he folds. And if he was bluffing, with how small his stack is, honestly, I don't think he'd continue bluffing. He ends up pretty quickly deciding to make the fold. So once again, back-to-back hands. We weren't able to get max value, but we ended up getting some money back in our pockets. Looking to capitalize on all of this good run. Let's see where this goes. Things are seeming to progress a little bit forward. The only trouble is, at this point in the session, we're playing 5, 6, and 7-handed, people are walking away, and the table is breaking. Either way, things are getting deep into the night. In this next hand, where Saya is in the cutoff and opens to $60. I find myself on the button with Jack-8 offsuit. Not a great hand, probably plays better if I just take aggression and 3-bet, but that'd be kind of spew anyway. So, look, we're playing 5-hand at this point. Why not just make the call? Which is what I do. Big blind calls as well. We're going off to a flop that comes Jack-10-6. All right, we flop ourselves a pretty decent little hand now. With the action checked over to our friend here on the right, she decides to c-bet for $110. I make the call, and so does our friend from the big blind. All right, so at this point, I feel like somebody might have a little bit of a draw here. Maybe somebody's bluffing with the continuation bet. We'll only know a little more information on the turn, which comes at 3 of hearts. This does introduce a backdoor flush draw, of course. And with the action checked once again to the initial raiser, she decides to c-bet once again for $325. This is where things get a little worrisome, and I think that my hand, although in fact it is pretty strong, even considering how short-handed we are, this should be a fold. For many reasons, but the most important one is my hand doesn't improve to the nuts in any way, and it's just not that great. I'm going to be getting value owned by better jacks a ton and over pairs. And even if an 8 came on the river, or even if a jack came, I still could have the worst hand. So that's exactly not what I do though. I end up making the call, and so does the big blind. We're going to a river that comes a pretty juicy one, as it comes the 9 of spades. Now introduces all those straight draws that we were talking about previously. Even more worrisome when the big blind just open rips it for 1K. Been pretty tight, like we said. I haven't seen him make a move like this in the past. So with the action folded to me, this is a pretty standard fold here. So we made the mistake on the turn there, but at least we were able to reconcile by making the proper laydown on the river and not getting carried away. Holding top pair is never easy, and especially not for me, but happy with the way we were able to get away from this on the river.
I'll be blown away if I could see a bluff here. I had the best hand against you for sure.
Oh. Do we want a new deck or keep on?
What would you say you had a best? I wasn't bluffing.
I don't think you're bluffing, but I beat bluffs. I just don't beat that river jam. That's the worst.
Well, like we've been talking about, I feel like there's just been a lot of deck not cooperation. But like I said, for the most part, today's session, we haven't been playing all that bad. Obviously, it's kind of hard to muck up a hand when you have aces and kings half the time, but let's continue on with the session. In this situation, we are playing 4-handed. Under the gun makes it $60 to go. I find myself on the button with pocket 10s. On the button, pocket 10s, 4-handed, mandatory 3-bet. I make it $225 to go. The small blind, who's been a very tight player, decides to cold call, which is alarm bells for sure. And if that was not a red flag in and of itself, out of nowhere, the tightest player at the table, probably a gentleman though. I did like this guy quite a bit. He 4-bets to $720, the cold 4. Well, under the gun snap gets out of the way, and now the action back on me. It's obnoxious to fold a hand this good 4-handed pre-flop, but this is a pretty easy fold for me. I end up throwing my hand at the muck. The big blind throws his hand in the muck, and he shows pocket jacks, and because our friend here from the big blind is so nice and wants to show for the vlog, he shows pocket aces. What the hell is happening? 10s, jacks, and aces, 4-handed. What the heck is going on? We barely escaped with our lives there. Thankfully we did, because that would have been pretty bad. Like I said, today's session is one of the longest ones I put in. 6+ hours in this session. We're still looking to battle. In this next hand, a very interesting thing happens when I'm on the button. We're playing four-handed and I have Jack 10 offsuit. $60 to go. Only the big blind calls. And we're going off to a very good flop that comes 10, 7, 5. Rainbow. The big blind decides to donk lead out here for $60. Okay, not that bad. I'm never folding, and I don't think raising is the best option, so I ended up making the call. The turn card comes a 4 of spades. At this point, our villain decides to check it over to me, and I think that betting here is pretty mandatory. We can get called by a ton of inferior hands as well as some other draws. I make it 175 to go. He ends up thinking about it for a moment before deciding on a call. The river comes a beautiful jack. It's kind of bittersweet though, as it does bring in the straight that I was most worried about, which was 8-9. And even more worrisome when our opponent decides to lead out for 325. I'm frustrated and I'm never folding, so I don't mean to nit roll here, but I do give a little bit of a speech talking about, you know, this is a frustrating river. I didn't think I needed it. I flip over my hand and immediately show my opponent, and I do make the call. Our opponent laughs it off and does say that he was bluffing, so luckily for us, we end up winning a pretty nice pot there to put us back in the right direction after a couple of little bad hands. Still playing four-handed at this point. Action on me on the button. I raise to $60 with 10-7 offsuit. Only the small blind makes the call. The flop comes queen, 10, 7. Bingo, bango, bongo, 2 pair. The bottom 2 pair. With the action checked over to me, I decided to c-bet here for $40. Going about a third the size of the pot here. My opponent pretty quickly makes the call. And we're going off to a turn card that comes a 4 of clubs. I don't want to just graze over too quickly, but I actually don't like my c-bet on the flop sizing. With the different combination of straight draws out there, obviously 8-9, Jack-9, King-Jack, there's so much more equity that I need to be denying against and getting value from, so don't like that bet. Either way, the turn card comes a 4 of clubs. At this point, our opponent decides to lead out for $125. This does bring a backdoor flush draw, but doesn't change much to the board. If I think I'm best, I think I should be raising here and charging all the random draws. So I end up doing just that. I make it $350 to go. My opponent obliges by making the call, and we're going off to a river card, hoping for a brick, and it doesn't come a brick. It comes a 7 of diamonds. All right. That's a massive, massive card for me to hit, and I have a pretty little, you know, disguised, sneaky little, you know, little boat here. With the action checked over to me, my opponent has about 2,500 total. Impossible for me to be just jamming and going that crazy, but I do like an overbet here. My opponent either has a really good hand or a really shitty hand. I end up making it $1,000 to go, and my opponent pretty quickly makes the fold. So definitely fell into the latter. He obviously had a bluff there, or was drawing and wasn't going to bluff, I should say. Nonetheless, we're going to go ahead and take this pot down. Moving in the right direction finally. Super excited about it. Looking to book a solid little win here. Alrighty, well, if pocket tens wasn't good the last time around, maybe it will be this time. I decided to raise from the button to $60, and we're playing three-handed at this point. Unbelievably so, the gentleman that had aces the last time around in this exact instance is in the small blind, and once again he 3-bets to $210. Well, against just a 3-bet in position, folding would be out of the question three-handed, so I end up making the call, and the flop is pretty reasonable as it comes 9, 6, 8, with 2 hearts and a spade. All right, we flop ourselves a gut shot and an overpair. This is not the worst flop I've ever seen in my life. Unfortunately, our opponent decides to c-bet for $300, and we're pretty likely that he has an overpair in this instance. But again, the 7 and the 10 can probably get us paid. So with the action on me, I end up making the call. We're going to a turn card that comes a king of diamonds. All right, at this point, my opponent checks it through, and I find myself in an interesting predicament where I can turn my hand into a bluff, which would be ridiculous and nobody would advise that, or I can check it and take it to showdown, which is what I end up doing. The river comes an 8 of hearts, and my opponent decides to check it once again. And at this point, it's just be not credible to bluff. Our opponent obviously has some showdown value. I don't think that he'd just give up with like ace, 10 or ace jack. He'd be more prone to bluff, or at least try or think about bluffing. He obviously has some form of showdown value like jacks or queens, so I end up checking it back. Good on him. Ends up taking that pot down. We just have not been able to beat our adversary not once today. And yeah, hopefully we can try to get it back later on. Either way, we're going to go ahead and live with our actions to this point. Alrighty, the second last hand of the session, and a really, really important one. The button makes it $60 to go. We're playing three-handed at this point. I find myself in the small blind with 8-7 suited. This is a mandatory 3-bet three-handed. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I end up just being super passive and making the call. The big blind calls as well, and we're going off 3 ways to a flop, family style, that comes 8, 5, 3 with 3 clubs. Monotone boards are very scary. I decide to check it over to the initial raiser, but before it even gets there, the big blind decides to bet out here, take over the lead, take over the reins of the hand, and make it $100 to go. The villain decides to make the call here, which is interesting, and I decide to make the call as well. And we're going on to a turn card that comes a beautiful offsuit 7. We now have top 2 pair on a very wet coordinated board. And even crazier is when we check it over to the big blind decides to bet out $300. Alrighty. With the action now on me, I think we can definitely get a value check raise in here. If our opponent was just slow playing a hand like an overpair, or if he's just overvaluing top pair, or has the naked ace of clubs, we're going to be getting a ton of value here. I end up raising to $800. My opponent thinks about it for a while before eventually deciding on just a call. All right, looking to brick out on the river here, please. The river comes the 6 of clubs. I'm throwing up in my mouth. This is just how the last couple of months have gone for me. In big pots, in big spots, I just can't seem to fade the river. Either way, I check it over to my opponent, you know, hoping or assuming, actually, I should say, that he's going to bet here. He actually doesn't. He checks it back. I show my hand, and he shows 8-7 offsuit with the 7 of clubs. Yeah, that sucks. Oh, man. When the free roll comes in and you're on the wrong side of it, it's so painful. I'm so frustrated right now. But don't worry, there is more. But wait, there's more. Just wait for the last hand of the session. Alrighty, the very last hand of the session, I told you I would not let you guys down. I think we're 4-hand at this point. We got a new table mate who bought in very short, bought in for the table minimum, which was 25 big blinds for $500. I looked down at my first card in this instance. I'm under the gun, and we looked down at an ace. That's good enough for me. I'm just going to raise 4-handed any ace, so I make it $60 to go. Next to act is playing $515 total, and he decides to 3-bet to a stupid sizing of 160. He's obviously clicking buttons. He has a big hand here. I mean, you're like, what are we doing? You have 20 big blinds, but okay, whatever. I'm cool with that. The action folds back over to me, and I peel down my second card, and I cannot believe it. I have pocket aces. I blind raised into the smallest stack of the table. I have pocket aces. He 3-bet me to a dumb sizing, so obviously he has a good hand. He's never doing this with like ace 10 offsuit, right? Either way, I end up jamming. He snap calls. I let him know immediately that we have pocket aces. He asks if we can run it twice. I oblige. That seems fine with me. He ends up letting me know immediately that he has pocket kings. And what ensues after this is the epitome of where poker is at for me at the moment. The first board comes out king high, which is super frustrating, but understandably so. We agreed to run it twice, so if we can even chop this, I'd be super happy with that. But nope. The poker gods have a different plan for me on the second board, as comes the case king. Yeah. I lose both boards. Sick. I don't know what else to say.
Fucking sick, dude. Oh my god. Oh my god. That's so crazy.
515.
Things not really turning in my favor. As you guys saw, massive favorite, obviously aces versus kings, and we get scooped somehow for running it twice. Big favorite to chop the pot when we both have top 2 pair, and it comes a club. So just a whole lot of more run bad. The one thing I can say at the end of today's session, besides the deuces hand, which was a pretty obvious punt, I was really satisfied with my play. And I think that's the reason I'm not really holding my head like down. I'm not upset at myself. Like, I don't know. I'm sure you guys might disagree or agree or whatever the heck, but I think I played fairly well. I made a couple of really fun little bluffs here and there. I got value in spots that, you know, regularly people don't, or I don't, or whatever. And yeah, it's just kind of a summary of how poker has gone for me lately. It's I can be a 90% favorite, 80% favorite, doesn't matter. But it's funny because negreanu says it the same thing in his vlog, where it's like, it doesn't matter how big of a favorite I am, it just feels like their 20% is always coming. So the one thing I can say with this whole downswing has been is that like at the beginning there was just like a lot of bad luck. In the middle there was just a ton of bad play. And I think today just kind of sums up the latter half of this, which has been not running too awesome. You know, you can only chalk this up to so much run bad. The one thing we can easily admit is that deuces hand was a punt, and that's where big blinds are won and lost. If you're gonna lose, you know, I lost whatever, like 15 or let's say 1200 in that hand. I didn't have to lose. Opening deuces out of the gun, even in a short-handed game, is kind of dumb. So I've got to be real with myself, and even though I've played pretty solid for the whole session, that one hand, you know, that's a loss of like whatever 60 big blinds in this game. That's a really big deal. So just gotta work on tightening up, or like I guess clogging the holes. But for the most part, for the remainder of the session, I feel like I played really solid. I kept ending up with the second best hand that just had to call in spots, and that's okay. That's a part of the game. Just sucks that I was up against it today. I mean, you could just see it. I had made the big fold with pocket tens against that four-handed pre-flop. Somehow got away to a single raise, which was awesome, and I did it correctly. And yeah, just I don't know. I feel like I'm just rambling on at this point, and I can't thank you guys enough for the support. It's I feel forever indebted to you guys. Without you guys, man, you know, only the higher powers know how frustrating this would be without being able to sit here and talk to a camera and have you guys on the other side, you know, making this feel much better. So today I'm happy with my play. Besides the deuces hand, we played well, and I think we can take that to the bank. We can be pretty satisfied with that. For the rest of the session, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to grow with. Didn't play perfect, no matter how well we played for the other X amount of hands we played, still can get better. That's what we got to keep working towards. So we were in today's game for 2960 and out for 602 exactly. So a loss of like 2350 something. Disappointed, but we'll get it back. Let's just grow better, get better. The one thing I can say is that I have a backlog now, so we can take a break. So I'll be probably taking like a week or two break, get back to studying, get back to feeling better about myself, and hopefully I can see a shaman and lick some frogs and run better. I can't thank you guys enough for sitting here, and I needed this. This was like therapy for me, I think. Thank you guys so much. I hope you guys have a lovely day. Stay happy, stay healthy. More importantly, guys, we're going to take